Good morning. We're going to get started. So you all are here for interpretation and communications, bridging the gap between to public understanding. My name's Jane Dool, and I'll be moderator today. I'm with the Port of Seattle. Our speaker is Michelle Perdue with Kitsap County. Michelle has over 15 years of experience in municipal stormwater with a focus on communications. Her work has included such diverse projects as major interagency stormwater management, group branding, the design of a national award-winning interpretive signage for Kitsap's first stormwater park, and managing outreach and information for several major construction projects. Prior to joining Kitsap County, Michelle was the municipal NPDES stormwater permit manager for the city of Moses Lake. She's education and outreach coordinator and interpretive master planner. Michelle.
Hey, good morning, you guys, and look at you sharing your second cup of coffee moment with me this morning. Thank you so much. So if any of you wandered into this session here looking how to translate from Portuguese, I have bad news for you. You might be in the wrong session, but that's okay because I'm going to try and make it interesting anyway. How many of you instantly recognize this publication as the perfect example of a document that was produced in governmentese? How many of you guys have produced a slew of these kind of documents? This is like a 12-step group, you guys. Everybody has done it. It's all okay, all right? My name is all over these kinds of things. So what I'm going to teach you today is how to translate governmentese into something that people will actually read. Because in reality, you know what? You don't have the luxury of talking to this audience, and that's a captive audience. That's a person who has to read what you're putting out in order to get the grade. With our non-captive audiences, they actually have a choice about whether to pick up that piece of information that you've put out and consume it. So we have to get people's attention because they have that choice. So here's what we did to try to evolve with that. We worked a lot harder at doing a lot better. And this publication, you can see, has some vast improvements over the one that I showed you before. So at a glance, here's what we're doing right. You can see right off the bat, that little symbol down there in the corner tells you, ooh, this must be construction that's going on. It's got a nice concise message at the top. It's got a graphic that tells you what's going on. And if you flip this puppy over to the back side, you have all of this additional information that you can consume, right? Okay, that's great. So you think you've got a really good message here, but why isn't it doing better? You think that you're sending your message directly between you and the audience, but in reality, what's happening and what we're not taking into consideration is this piece. There's a great deal of background noise, and that background noise can be advertising, politics, TV, radio, email. It's all of those things that are competing with your message when you're sending it out there into the world. Okay, that could be what you're going to have for dinner or whether your kid has an assignment to turn in tonight. So how do we make sure that our message is actually cutting through that noise? First of all, we have to know how people decide to read that message that we're sending. Well, this is how people actually make those decisions. And there's a little piece of mental math that we're doing when we make these decisions on a daily basis. And you make hundreds of them, whether consciously or unconsciously, all the time. You look at something and you say, what do I think I'm going to get as a benefit out of doing this thing? And how hard do I think it's going to be to do it? And if that math doesn't work out, you're not going to choose to do it. That could be reading that message that I put out there on that postcard. So if that's the case, then my postcard is going in the garbage, okay? So how do we fix this? Well, what we've got to do is we've got to change that math there. We either have to change the expectation of reward on the top, we have to change the effort required to consume it on the bottom, but ideally what we want to do is we want to work on both of those things because that's where we become the most successful. So let's start from scratch. How do we get around this? First of all, rule number one of outreach, and you guys all know this, is know your audience. And for the most part, what you know is your audience isn't every single person out there in the world. Your audience is a specific subset of people that you're directly talking to. So you want to know that audience, whether that's moms with kids, whether that's farmers, whether that's business owners. They all speak a different language. They all demand that message that is communicated to them in a particular way in order for that to resonate with them. Okay? Meet that audience where they are. You need to speak their language. And that could literally be their language. So if they speak in Portuguese, if that's their first language, you better be serving them their outreach materials in Portuguese. Okay? You also need to give it to them in a way that makes them want to consume it. And that goes back to that math that we looked at just a moment ago. Once you know who your audience is, you also need to know how long you have to talk to them. So 20 years ago, our average attention span was 12 seconds. And that doesn't seem like a whole lot until you look at today's attention span. Today's attention span is 8 seconds. Let me put that in perspective for you. I have a goldfish that can pay more attention than your target audience. So this is a problem. How do we talk to a goldfish? Well, the best way to do that is to start with the end in mind. What do we need your audience to know in order to get them to do what you need them to do? That piece right there, that's your big idea. That is your so what moment. So you're taking your message and you're condensing that thing down into one little chunk of information. That's the key. You have 8 seconds to make that point. And here's how you do it. The first thing that you have to do is that you don't get that 8 seconds unless you provoke them to pay attention to what you're saying. Secondly, you need to connect that somehow to that audience in a personal and relevant way so that they can see themselves in what you're saying. And only then do you get to that carefully crafted message that you put together. And the nexus of all three of these things is a successful message. I'm going to run you through some really good examples of what I mean by each one of these concepts. Provoke, relate, reveal. Those are interpretive principles. So here's a really good example of some visual hooks. And visual hooks are a really great way to do it. You can do it either via text or you can do it with these really good graphics. But if you see this at a glance, odds are it's going to make you want to read further. Here's a really good example of an image that may resonate with your audience. Okay? And a reveal. And I've got to say, you guys, if that second panel there doesn't get you right in the feels, you might be a cat person, okay? So here's an example of what Kitsap's been doing. We're taking those interpretive principles and we are applying those to some of our projects. So we have a rain garden program, and the whole intent and purpose of that is to get people to sign up to have a rain garden at their property. That's awesome. Sounds great. Sounds like something everybody will want to do, right? Okay, well, we put out traditional materials like these brochures. It's got a lot of information on it. It's got everything you want to know about how to sign up for a rain garden, why you should do it, all of the things that we think they need to know. And those are okay. But these ads get to the heart of the matter. So what do we have here as far as a visual hook? Would this get you to read further? Okay. This second one here with the recipe for a rain garden, for this particular audience, that went into a home and garden magazine. So we're targeting that directly at people who are into their home improvement and beautiful gardens. So that's an image that resonates with that particular audience. This is a key, and if you take nothing more away from this, I want you to write these down, okay? The rule of 3 is critical when you're designing your materials. You have 3 seconds to earn their interest. You have 30 seconds once you've got them to sustain it. And you have 3 minutes to make your case. So here's how to maximize those numbers. You do that by organizing your content. So let me translate this a little bit differently. That's 3 seconds on the hook. That's 30 seconds on your main point. And here's a point about that one. You should steal from journalists. Journalists have it right in this case. Their statement is never bury your lead. And your lead is that key message. Remember a couple of slides ago that we got it down to, that one little concise chunk? You lead with that. You put that right up at the top so that even if all they do is spend 3 to 30 seconds on that material, they have taken away your key message and they've done what you wanted them to do. And then you get your 3 minutes of supporting content, and that's all of the extras. Okay? Here's what it looks like in real life. So I'll give you a little compare and contrast project. Kitsap County did these series of BMP interpretive signage in 2012. And at that time, this was really cutting edge. I mean, we did a really good job. We were really proud of these. They went a long ways. They were borrowed by several jurisdictions. I think they're well out into the world right now. Okay. In the meantime, though, what we know now is attention spans have changed. Communications have changed, and we need to evolve along with that. We've learned a lot more about the principles of interpretation as it applies to these sorts of things. So now what are we finding? When we look at these and we get ready to redo them, here are the types of things that I'm seeing. I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, at least 8 messages going on in there. I'm seeing a logo fest down there in the corner. Okay? I am seeing an awesome graphic. I mean, the graphic is really doing a good job here. It's doing a lot of the heavy lifting. And I think that how does permeable pavement work is really interesting. But as I'm following that, that leads my eye down into the corner over here into permeable pavement options, and that doesn't make any sense. We read from left to right. So why is that leading me into a different message when in reality, it's supposed to be leading me back through 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so we've got a flow problem there. So how did we fix this? Well, this is the new stab at it. These are the recent iteration of these signs that we've redesigned, and we've done a couple of things to try to address some of these ideas. And I'll be frank with you, at this point in time, this looks really good for today. In 5 years, we'll be doing this again because things will have changed, and you need to stay on top of the changes that happen and keep your publications fresh. So a couple of the things that are a little bit better about this version is you'll notice that we've eliminated a lot of the pieces of information. We've made the flow better. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it reads from left to right in a natural flow. We've used the graphic to do a lot more of the heavy lifting. We've used some icons in place of a lot of text. But the most important thing with this one is the one most important thing that I need somebody to take away from this sign is right up there at the top. And if they only stop for that 3 seconds, they know what the deal is. You're standing in front of a piece of porous pavement. This is what it does. This is the purpose. Again, this is another key piece, and you should write this down. These are some magic numbers, and if you remember these, while you're designing your interpretive pieces, you'll have it made. 250 words per minute is what the average college student can consume. And that seems like a weird little factoid. But here's what that means to you. That's what a college student can consume. And what is a college student? That's somebody that's consuming written material on a daily basis in order to read and comprehend it. They can read and comprehend 250 words a minute because they're actively learning and practicing that skill all of the time. Your average person who is not doing any one of those things maybe reads at half that rate. Okay? Knowing that about our audiences, that means that we should use these next 2 facts as our rule of thumb. No more than 75 words per element. And when I'm talking about elements, I'm talking about these things back here. So that paragraph up at the top, these little bites of information off to the side. No more than 18 words per sentence. If you have more than 18 words in a sentence, I can guarantee you, you are not writing for your audience, you're writing for your boss or for yourself. because they're not going to read it anywhere past that, okay? There's a reason why Twitter is so effective, okay? That condensed character limit forces us to be concise, and it forces us to be simple in our terminology. So take your cues from things like that when you're doing your writing. Make it easy for your audience to consume, okay? Give them small bites of info, and what that can mean is keeping it concise, giving them bullets, giving them small blocks, giving them delineated blocks with different colors so that you can break up that information into small bites. Use your active voice. And I know that we all love that technical style writing. We just do. We use passive voice. It's by nature. But when we're doing this kind of outreach writing, it loves active voice. You'll make more of a connection that way. Mind your reading level. So when you're designing a piece of communication collateral, you should always drop that into your word processor program, run it through the Fleisch-Kincaid, and see where that lands out, because you should be somewhere between 5th and 8th grade as a general rule for that, okay? And finally, avoid the jargon. And I know we love this too. This is an issue that's dear to our hearts, and I know that it's going to seem like everybody needs to know that that's a bioretention facility, but in reality, your public probably sees that as a rain garden, and you need to speak their language in order to make that connection. And if you want more info on that, there's another really good presentation in this exact room talking about stormwater and ways to inspire people at 11:10, and I highly encourage you to stay and take advantage of that one too. Okay? Finally, here is a really good example of a piece that I ran across earlier today. Okay? Totally ignore the caption on the right and tell me how that graphic works for you. To me, what this says is I can look at that and I can see that is iconic. That is a bison. I can recognize that. I can see those are spring flowers. I've got a little tiny hashtag chunk at the bottom that says Parks in Spring. I know exactly what National Park Service wants me to do with this message before I ever get to their text. This is a super example of a graphic doing the heavy lifting for you. Wherever you can, you should take advantage of that. And I'm going to cycle back just a little bit. I gave you a bunch of commercial advertising examples earlier, and I would highly advise you as you're going along through this process that if you get stuck, go out there and look at commercial advertising and see how they do this, because they have all of the funds in the world to have studied the psychology behind marketing, the way it's done. They know the tips and tricks, and you can look at good ads and see why they work for you and steal some of those concepts for yourself. So once you get this graphic, you can look down at the corner there and see the caption and say, you know what? I got that message. They're going to reiterate it in the text, but I got it. I got it right through that graphic. Finally, once you've come up with that amazing thing, you've got your message down to the way it needs to be, you've got it finessed and it's working great, don't reinvent the wheel, okay? If you've got it in one format, use that across multiple formats. That strengthens the message, it enhances the message repetition. It's what we call cross-platform messaging. And you should be able to take that message and adapt it to whatever format different kinds of media is going to require. That's one caveat with this one, is you want to pay attention to what the particular parameters each of those types of media has. So for that particular message here, the Scout Your Route, this had to do with a construction project that we were doing, that we were telling people they needed to look ahead and plan out their route to know where they were going to avoid the construction. That little message we did in a very graphic style for the handout. We did in a slightly shorter format in social media. You can see down there on the bottom right, we've got an expanded magazine article for a little bit more information on the details behind that project. And for the more technically minded folks, we have an actual fact sheet. But they're all based on that same exact message. So it's saving you work in the long run, and it's enhancing that message repetition for your audience all the way through. Finally, here are the last few pieces that puts it all together. Keep it short and sweet. Condense it down to the essence of your message. Connect it to your audience. And then serve it up cleanly, and your success will improve in your communications. Okay. Any questions?